There is blood on the fan. There's blood on the ceiling in multiple rooms of this apartment. There is pooled and seeped blood into the carpet in the living room on the floor area, and seeped blood, a significant quantity of seeped blood on the couch that is the primary couch in that living room. And in the middle of the area by the couch, there is a missing area where there's blood surrounding it, but then there's a rectangled off area that has no blood whatsoever. It's pristine, which certainly suggests to anybody who looks at it that an area rug, a medium sort of size area rug, was there when significant bleeding happened and is now missing from that apartment. There are little splinters of wood on the couch that are also there, interspersed in the blood and interspersed in hair that is located, strands of hair located on that couch as well. Law enforcement tests several locations at various places. You'll hear where they tested. Each time they tested and they found that it was blood, each of those times the blood came from one individual, and that was Rosalio Gutierrez. You will hear that the blood is sprayed, meaning there was impact in multiple locations and multiple different times based on where the blood is located and how the blood presents or looks when law enforcement is present. Remember, present 2 days, about a day and a half after the event. Again, that area rug is completely missing. You'll hear that you might hear some testimony about something called arterial spray, where there's a finer, misty place there too. So some of what you might hear is blunt force trauma, hard objects hitting a bleeding surface. Some areas that you might hear about are more likely, or at least are possible areas where maybe a knife or some sharp object penetrated someone as opposed to blunt force. Rosalio's own phone records say that he dropped his kids off because he had them that weekend. He dropped them off on the 17th, and then he went home, and he was home by 9:08 p.m., so just within an hour of when he's never seen again. Opened a beer, drank a beer, I think maybe opened a second beer, was expecting this Miss Macias to arrive. His TV was on, and his phone it goes off at 10:30 p.m. around, and that's found several days later, hidden in his freezer. His phone and his credit cards are behind all the items in his freezer, hidden there. In the cold, the phone goes off. The last time that phone is on in any way, shape, or form is around 10:30 p.m. on the 17th. Rosalio's keys are there. His wallet has ended up on the couch over some areas that already had blood, so it was placed there after the bleeding occurred. As I said, his credit cards were found in the apartment. There's been no evidence that his credit cards or his bank accounts or any other identifying pieces of that type have been used ever in the 1,018 days since. The home, you'll see the pictures, is filled with pictures of his two children, 11 and 8. He didn't miss gymnastic events. He was an enthusiastic baseball coach for his 11-year-old. You will hear electronic media talk about his excitement and planning for his coaching of his 11-year-old that will be starting literally just days, certainly weeks. Baseball season is right around the corner, and watching his son play baseball was one of the true pleasures of his life. 2 days after he is gone, he has in his date book, his planner, that he is going to be at Camp Timberlea with his children. Some of you may know that local summer camp. That's a 2-day. That's an experience that's supposed to occur on May 19th, just 2 days after this. He never arrives. He never accounts for this with his kids. Obviously, he never coaches baseball. In fact, neither of his kids, who talked to him all the time, who saw him every week, who were in contact with him multiple times a week, you'll hear that his 11-year-old son spoke to him during this time period multiple times per day. And there was never another split second of communication, and has not been for 1,018 days. He has missed their birthdays. He and his mother had a very close relationship, very close. And he has missed all of her important occasions in the last 1,018 days. And the kids he was so devoted for. Never, ever before missed these occasions. Never before, ever out of touch his entire life with the people who cared about him. And not a peep from him since. So I'm back to who the police should go to first. The defendant has actively admitted to Sadie that he is jealous, that he has admitted to Sadie, and then finally to law enforcement, that he took his 11-year-old, as I mentioned, to the mom's home. He has a recording of that incident in his phone, a brief recording of that in his phone, and so law enforcement certainly focuses on the person who has documented motive and jealousy documented. All of this is interesting because it happens while the defendant, according to a woman, his girlfriend, Christine Remsburg, is literally living or staying 4 or 5 nights a week at his girlfriend's home. So what I'm describing to you are things he is doing only when he has his kids over, if he is actually traveling around, or he is doing it despite the fact he continues to have this relationship with, when she's interviewed in May of 2020, she says this relationship has been going on about a year, and that he spends 4 to 5 nights a week at her house. But the motive for the defendant is to end this relationship and to do anything he must to stay in control. So, the defendant has his kids on this weekend of May 16th and 17th, right? This is the fateful weekend. Sadie picks those kids up in the afternoon. So in the late afternoon, she picks those kids up. And the daughter will tell you, 12 years old, the back of my dad's van, his minivan, which he used to transport us on the afternoon of the 17th, so the same day this happens, was normal. There were no bleach stains and no problems with the carpet in the back of his minivan when she last saw it on the afternoon of the 17th. So now the question is, what is the evidence that the defendant prepared for this attack, this murder? Well, one of the things he did was on May 15th, he took out $50,000 in cash from his account. When law enforcement gets there, he still has more than $46,000 in cash. You're going to see pictures of the bank bag, literally all the money still bound together. So he's got that, and the state will suggest to you that's in case anything goes wrong. He can make that quick run to some location to be out of harm's way or out of apprehension with that much money on hand. You'll hear the daughter indicate that when she left on Sunday afternoon, just hours before Rosalio Gutierrez is gone, that she saw rope and duct tape, new rope and new duct tape, down in his basement. It was down on top of essentially a wheelie, a desk chair that's down there. When law enforcement gets to this location on the 19th, there is a wheelie chair down there in the basement. The daughter is completely right about that. But no rope, no new rope, and no new duct tape. So the state would suggest to you that is ideal stuff if you think you need to move a person bleeding, dead, if you need to seal up a carpet, try to prevent as much bleeding as you possibly can from the body of the person you're removing from his own apartment. During this period of time, there is an extremely heavy rain going on in Kenosha and in the Milwaukee area. Very heavy rain. And so people are not out and about, obviously, in the same way they normally would be. Another way that the defendant prepares is when we go into his multiple phones, we find that the phone he usually uses to contact people, the phone that he usually uses in situations, is not being answered, though it is just before and just after, but not being answered from 7:30 p.m. to 11:19 p.m. Left behind the phone that had smart capabilities that would be tracked, left that behind, and so was not able to answer the calls and the texts that come from multiple people, including his girlfriend Christine Remsburg, who tries to contact him multiple times because she is expecting him in those evening hours to come over. She's talking about what they're going to have for dinner. She's talking about what movie they're going to watch. And finally, she basically, sometime before 11:19 p.m., says, okay, I'm going to bed. She's expected him. And he never shows up at her house and never gives her an explanation until after he would have time to drive from his home in Mequon to Kenosha, commit this crime, and get back to the Mequon area, grab up the phone that he hasn't been answering, and now texts her and says, oh, sorry, fell asleep. Fell asleep during the exact hours that Rosalio Gutierrez is never seen again. And then has a very long conversation with her, like a 42-minute conversation with her from midnight to 12:49, maybe trying to get back in her good graces. Because she's back with him the next night. She comes to his house for one of the very first times she's ever come to his house. She comes to his house that night, the next night, and then the night after that, which is the night he's apprehended. So then I want to talk about the cover-up. Because a lot of times the way you can tell that somebody's responsible for something is their cover-up, right? That's a common way of determining somebody did something really bad. So officers get to the defendant in the evening hours. And so it's been 2 full days since Rosalio Gutierrez is gone to everyone who knows him. And prior to police getting there, a close couple of buddies of Rosalio Gutierrez who have heard Rosalio Gutierrez say, hey, I've got this new woman I'm seeing, her name is Sadie, she's got a crazy ex-boyfriend, and maybe even that he broke in my truck one time, right? So when Rosalio Gutierrez is missing, and the friend group begins to understand this, Michael Campbell is the type of friend who will drive to the person's house where that is suspected in his mind and just go and try to confront the guy. And so he and his buddy go there and they beat the police there because the police are still, doing the police things. And they bring up, hey, our buddy Rosalio is missing. Do you know anything about this? And the defendant claims he's not his brother. Claims he's not Zachariah Anderson. He claims he's his brother. He calls the cops. By then, these guys have already left. They're not trying to fight anybody or anything else. They're simply trying to ask a question. This guy's clearly not going to answer their question. They leave. So he already knows by that moment that Rosalio Gutierrez, this person he's focused on, who he's been to his house, he's texted a direct quote of what he said. He's done all sorts of other stuff regarding him. He's certainly communicated to Sadie many times about him. This guy's missing. When they go on the 19th and they look inside that minivan of the defendants, they find that the back is bleached There's all sorts of bleach stains on the back carpeting. The seats are out, just the front seats are in, and the back third of the carpeting in that van has literally been cut out. So you're down to where the electronics is exposed, you're down to the plastic flooring under. The carpeting from the minivan is missing, is cut out. Where on the 17th in the afternoon, his daughter said, yeah, it was in there. Nothing was cut out of there. And there was no bleach. Fresh smell of bleach. Carpet cut out in the last 48 hours. You'll hear that in the early morning hours on the 18th, so let's say defendant arrives back in Mequon. By 4:18 a.m., he's searching for area stores by him and when they first open. So he puts in Menards, he puts in Walmart, he's going through all the basic stores. Which of them opens first is essentially his line of inquiry. And he ends up getting a Walmart, opens at 8. This search happened at 4:18 a.m. Okay, this is now about 6 hours after Rosalio Gutierrez is last known alive. And you will decide what to make of this. The defendant arrives there just after 8, like 8:15, 8:18. It's pouring rain. It's still pouring rain, just as it was the day before. Pouring rain parking lot, not many cars. He parks as far as you can humanly park that minivan from the entrance. And he walks that whole distance in, as opposed to parking in any of the probably hundreds of spots that are closer. He parks as far away as possible. Does he have the body still in the back of that car, wrapped in that rug? He buys, with cash, bleach, rubber gloves, garbage bags, shampoo, Q-tips, pays cash, leaves, and heads over to an area where he is doing home demo and he's doing some demo at a lake house in the Belgium-Wisconsin area. A little more isolated location. It's not his house, in case law enforcement was already looking for him, in case the body had been discovered. This is on the 18th in the morning, okay, just hours after Rosalio Gutierrez has never been seen. He's at that location, according to his phone, for 3 hours. And then leaves, goes to many other locations, but near that location, so within that immediate area, is a state park, is Lake Michigan, is a number of other remote locations, and hundreds of dumpsters, right? Over the course of any area in Wisconsin, there are hundreds of dumpsters where you might put the remains of Rosalio Gutierrez. He's got a burn pit at his house that he has smoldering when the cops get there 2 days later. He's been operating the burn pit in the pouring rain. In it are an underwear band from Fruit of the Loom underwear, jean buttons, steel-toed boot components. Did he burn some clothes that he might have been wearing on that day? Officers eventually get into the defendant's laptop. When they get into it, they find a file that's labeled Rosalio Gutierrez Jr. So it's got his name. This is before law enforcement talks to him. I mean, I'm sorry, they don't know this. They haven't been in his computer when they speak to him. But he's typed in the name, Rosalio Gutierrez Jr. In that are picture after picture screenshots of Facebook photos of Rosalio Gutierrez out socializing, but also a number of pictures of him with his kids. And we're going to show those to you to let you think about whether this is obsessive sign of dangerous behavior, to have collected these kind of photos in this folder on your laptop. It's got business info, it's got CCAP entries, it's got an electronic map that's pinned to the actual location of Rosalio's home. And then in that same file, under that same label, he's got a picture of one of these trackers. Just a photo of the tracker, like a screenshot, right? Auto tracker, voice activated, that spy equipment that he has ordered and paid for just days before. So the defendant, when law enforcement speaks to him on May 19th, knows Rosalio Gutierrez is missing, knows they want to talk to him about the possible stalking of Rosalio Gutierrez. That's what they tell him they're talking about. He knows what he has been doing. He knows the facts that we've described happened. There's no way the defendant does not understand how important a moment this is. Here's his chance, if he's an innocent man, right, to talk about exactly what the details are that will exonerate him. Let's clear this up. Here's what the defendant does. When asked what vehicle he drives, he wants to stick with that he drives the Audi vehicle. In actual fact, Christine Remsburg is driving the defendant's Audi around because her car's on the fritz, so he hasn't driven that car around recently much at all. In the Walmart video, for instance, on the 18th, he's driving the minivan. When he drives the kids back and forth on the 17th, he's driving the minivan. He decides to only share that he's driving the Audi. Why not bring up the minivan? Why not tell him right away, hey, the car I'm using is the minivan. Please go search it. Go do whatever you want. Go take a look at my minivan. Absolutely. Instead, he wants to talk about the Audi. Reluctantly indicates that the minivan is a vehicle. Oh, but anybody could drive that. That's how he decides to behave, knowing how important this moment is. He acts to these officers, tries to give these officers the impression he doesn't even know this Mexican guy's name. I think they call him Junior, something like that, he wants to say. Well, he's written Rosalio Gutierrez Jr. in his computer. He's told his daughter the name of Rosalio Gutierrez. There's a phone message or a phone recording that he records between him and Sadie where he finally admits, okay, I told her the name. And yet with law enforcement on the 19th, he chooses to act as if this is not even a name he knows. He says Olivia gets that from a grandma, when in fact he admits to Sadie that's not the case. He denies ever being at Rosalio's home to the officers, where we know based on the electronic evidence, both his text and his own phone, that he's there on May 13th. We know that. But he chooses to deny that he has been there. In fact, says, I don't think I've been to Kenosha. Though his phone is going off a Kenosha tower when he is directly quoting Rosalio. Then, he's asked a very simple question. Again, this is the 19th. Where were you in the evening 2 days earlier? Okay? Not where were you 5 Wednesdays ago. Where were you in the evening 2 days ago? He says, yeah, I was with my girlfriend, Christine Remsburg, spent the night over there, that's where I was. Later goes off that, later changes that up a little bit, but that's what he wants to go with. When Christine Remsburg, who has been with him the last 2 nights after he didn't show up at her house on the date of this homicide, when she's asked that question, also during this exact same time period, where was he? She also chooses to provide false information about his whereabouts. She says, yeah, he was with me, and that's completely false. She eventually is exposed because her sister says, that's not what happened, and when confronted with that, she says, okay, you're right. He wasn't at my house. So the two of them have exactly the same false information about where he was. So you are going to finally hear two other important pieces of evidence from the state's perspective. One is when the crime lab examines the van in question. These are people who are the experts in the state at trying to figure out whether there's worthwhile evidence and then trying to do the appropriate testing of evidence having to do with DNA in the state. And so the experts come and the van is eventually brought to them, and they go through that van and they identify a particular location that is near the back, so in that same 1/3 of the minivan where the carpet has now been cut out, but it's about halfway up and it's on the plastic panel and it's just a little speck. And when the two DNA and crime scene analysts, when the DNA and crime scene analysts see that, they both say, we think that's blood. But it's so small that they decide that is just going to be our observation. We're not going to use a chemical on it. We're afraid we might not get DNA if we do that. So they observe, they believe it's blood. It is taken to the crime lab. It is tested. And based on the results, again, the analyst, Lisa Treffinger, will tell you she believes it's blood. She believes that based on the process of elimination. It's not semen. It's not skin cells. It's not saliva. It's not a piece of hair. And therefore, based on the content, based on what we can get on the results, it is blood. I believe it to be blood. She'll offer that opinion to you. She'll also tell you that her test tells her that blood is the DNA of Rosalio Gutierrez. Rosalio Gutierrez, there's not going to be any evidence he's ever been in this van, certainly that he's ever bled in this van, that he has anything to do with this van, and his blood, his DNA, is located on that speck amidst the area, not in the same area, but in the van filled with bleach and with the cutout carpet. Cutout carpet is never found, by the way. Clothes that the defendant was wearing on the 17th are never found, by the way. Then finally, you're going to hear evidence of an individual, an inmate named Marquand Washington. Marquand Washington has very serious federal charges that are going on right now, and he's being housed in the Kenosha jail on those federal charges. You'll hear him say that several months ago, he came forward to his attorney and told his attorney that I previously roomed with, I shared a cell, I was a bunkmate with the defendant. That when that occurred, that we bonded over some common sort of criminal activity. So, we talked, and I'm not going to talk about the details, but that they bonded over some discussions of their life prior to this date. You'll hear that Marquand Washington was able to tell details about the case, such as when the police raided the defendant's residence, they found a lot of money and a little bit of weed, and that. You'll hear Marquand Washington say the defendant described the house that was raided as a crappy house, but in a nice area. You'll hear Marquand Washington say the defendant told him when talking about murder that murder takes a lot of work, that you have to figure out ways to track people and stalk them, learn their habits, learn what they are up to so that you can find your moment. He suggested trackers from Amazon would be something that would be worthwhile to consider. Marquand Washington says the defendant told him that he wrapped the body up and took it away, that he put the body in trash bags, that he made sure the trash was gone and so it will never be found. Marquand Washington will say, well, how did you lift that guy? You know, how did you lift him, you know, like however you got him out of there? And the defendant told him, I was working out at that point. I was so strong, adrenaline. He said, I was like Superman. The combination of adrenaline and my working out was what allowed him to do it solo. Marquand Washington tried to get him to tell him, well, why? Why'd you do this? And he said he never really had a real answer, but that one thing that struck him that the defendant told him was, my ex was getting serious with this guy, and she was happy. The defendant admitted to Marquand Washington he also had a girlfriend then, though they are no longer together during the period of time that the two of them stayed together. But he provided those details. So you'll hear about the preparation. You'll hear about the act itself. You'll hear from people who love and care about Rosalio Gutierrez that he is gone. You'll hear about the physical evidence, and you'll hear about the confession made. And when you combine all of those pieces of evidence, then from the state's perspective, you will have enough evidence and will hold the defendant responsible.